Sure. I'll talk it out.
Yeah, let's just have a conversation.
Track 3.
Better not be fucking Dave Matthews Band.
Okay. Those of you who don't want to be a part of this can leave now.
Derek, please listen to me.
But if you choose to stay, which it seems like you guys are choosing...
Derek, please.
You understand and agree to the following terms and conditions.
Derek!
1.
Derek, this is the virus.
You hereby waive your right
Derek, please.
to your own personal bodily integrity.
This is not you.
2.
I'm a life...
Per the state versus Neville Reed, my colleague and I will not be held criminally liable for any felony or misdemeanor that you may be a victim of, including, but not limited to, aggravated assault, aggravated battery, disorderly conduct, destruction of property, mayhem, and first-degree murder. And 3, terms and conditions may change or be updated whenever the fuck I want! Consider yourselves notified.
What up, everybody? DJ Noob is here with you on Metal Time Radio Podcast, doing a new little segment I call Global Unscripted. And basically, this is going to be a segment where I talk basically just about social issues, other forms of entertainment, just news in general that isn't really related to games or movies per se. We might have some political content at some point. These are things that, Neko would probably really like to be involved in this discussion because I know she has some strong opinions about the movie Barbie, which this is about. And for those who don't know, Barbie is nominated for Best Picture of the Year. It has some other nominations as well, but in terms of Best Actress and Director, both Margot Robbie and Greta Gerwig were not nominated. So this created like this big stir, right? And one of the other things was Ryan Gosling, who played Ken, one of the Kens in the movie, had a song that says, "I'm not Ken enough" or something like that. And apparently that won like best song or something. So there's all this, outrage and whatnot that, Gerwig and Robbie weren't nominated for particular categories, even though they have a lot of other nominations. So in order to make it a little bit easier, I found a piece of video that I'm going to throw up, and we're going to kind of walk through it and listen to it a little bit as this other lady is going to break down reasons why it's kind of silly to be outraged about the snubs, as they call it. It's from a YouTuber called Mediaholic, and I don't know her. I don't know much about her other than I just found this video. There's a few other stuff out there. There's articles and whatnot also debating this whole issue. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about, because I do have some strong opinions about it myself. So we'll see how it goes. Because really, when Neko and I went to see Barbie, like, she thought it was like one of the best movies of the year. 10 out of 10 for her. For me, it was more of a 7 out of 10. It wouldn't make my top 10 list. If you saw my top 10 list, we talked about it a little bit at the end when I chose what my number one was. But this breaks down, like, I just thought it was kind of silly about all the Oscar stuff. And I also went back and looked at some of the other Best Picture winners, and I'm going to get into that as well when we go talking about this. So let's bring this up.
Barbie and the snubs ricocheting through Barbie land and the real world. Now, I know the Oscar nominations came out a few days ago, but we've been a bit busy here at Inside Politics in New Hampshire with the primary there and all. But a social media post from Hillary Clinton caught our attention, and we wanted to share it. Quote, "Greta and Margot, while it can sting to win at the box office but not take home the gold, your millions of fans love you. You're both so much more than Knuff."
What?
All right, everyone, I know it's a pretty silly story, even for this channel standards, but let's talk about the Barbie Oscar drama situation, because if you hadn't heard, recently the nominees for this year's Oscars were released, and to my surprise at least, the Barbie movie collected quite a few nominations. As Bounding Into Comics reports, the film is in the running for a total of 8 accolades, including Best Actor in a Supporting Role for Ryan Gosling as Ken, Best Actress in a Supporting Role for America Ferrera as Gloria, Best Costume Design, Best Picture, Best Production Design, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Original Song for I'm Just Ken. Now, the Barbie nominations overall surprised me for several reasons. Number one, and I've spoken about this before, I feel like award shows, especially the Oscars, are more and more catering to niche, art house, inaccessible, not very commercial films, kind of independent things that only a handful of people have seen. So for a movie like Barbie, that is arguably this huge blockbuster, very commercial, very accessible to be.
Now let's stop it there for a minute, right? Okay, so she mentions how the award shows generally favor like independent films, or as she say, films that are a niche, right? So I went back because I was curious about the type of films that were winning Oscars like the past few years. So I went back, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, at least 8 years and 9 almost. Okay. Um, so let's start with last year. Everything Everywhere All at Once. It was the movie with Jamie Lee Curtis and Michelle Yeoh that shocked the world by winning the Best Picture of the Year and all these other awards. The Asian woman, and there's Asian actors and whatnot in it. So, and it's kind of interesting that we made a big deal about this film. Now, granted, I had a chance to watch this movie not too long ago, and everybody was talking about saying how great it was. Now, I didn't think it was bad, but I'd still give it like a 7. Like I still put it down where Barbie is in terms of entertainment. Like I didn't think it was that great. Just my opinion. But I'm not, but I could sit here and argue Oscar winners all day long because for instance, 4 years ago, like one thing we talked about this year with me and my friends who are all kaiju lovers about Godzilla Minus One, to me should have been nominated, not just nominated for Best Picture of the Year, but won. Even though they haven't chosen the winners yet. But I still think Godzilla Minus One is the best film of the fucking year. But a lot of arguments that were made was it's a foreign film, so chances are it's not going to do it. But here's the fucking funny thing, right? So 4 years ago, Parasite, which is a Korean film, I believe, is a foreign film, and it won Best Picture. So if you're going to allow Parasite to win, there's really no reason to keep Godzilla Minus One out. I don't care if there's a giant monster in the film or not. There's a lot more to that story, and it's more in depth than you would think. But that's neither here nor there. That's just my opinion, right? But that just shows you that the Oscars aren't totally ignoring foreign films when it comes to their best pictures. So here's some other ones that I found that I haven't seen. Like 1, 2. I never saw Parasite either. I only saw pieces of it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So out of the movies I chose to go back on, 5 of them I've never seen or really even heard of. So you have Everything Everywhere All at Once this past year. Then before that was Coda. Before that was Nomadland. Then Parasite. Before that was Green Book. Now, this movie I did see, The Shape of Water, I did see that, which is a very odd movie, which, again, like, that has, like, monster stuff going on in it. There's a lot more to it, obviously, but it's almost like a modern-day Creature from the Black Lagoon type shit. But either way, that's a strange enough movie to where, again, if I'm going to make an argument that Godzilla should have been at least nominated, that would be one. Like, that's, even though Del Toro, that was an American movie. I don't think it should have, you shouldn't dismiss Godzilla just because it's a foreign film. Then before that was Moonlight. Excuse me, I'm still fighting this cold, but Moonlight, and then Birdman, which I did see, which is pretty good. But if I went back to that year with Birdman, I'm not sure if I would even say that was my favorite movie of the year, but I did enjoy that film. But it goes back to our point about, uh, you know, a lot of the more independent niche type films that no one's really talking about, even for nominations. Um, I had to go back quite a ways to find a film that would match Barbie in terms of like fantasy or um, something that's not really niche. And so, really, even though this other movie is way better than Barbie, the last time that I found a film that probably people did not expect it when was Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. So that's how far back you have to go to find a film that's not your usual weird or niche or independent film. Like this was Lord of the Rings was a big deal, right? The whole trilogy and all that. So the fact that a fantasy film like that would actually win an Oscar is pretty amazing. But that just shows you now, like, so Barbie being nominated, this young lady's going to get into the details of why she feels, and I would agree with her about why Barbie doesn't really deserve a nomination. So here we go.
Nominated. I mean, I think overall it's a step in the right direction. I guess if the Oscars actually want people to be invested in the show, it helps if they've seen the movies that are nominated. But still, it kind of surprised me, and I can also guarantee that if the film hadn't had a very obvious feminist message and it was just a regular blockbuster, there is no way that it would have been nominated so many times. And aside from its commercial appeal, another reason why I didn't expect Barbie to get so many accolades is because
Yep, and that's one thing I want to point out is that she's right. If Barbie hadn't had all these other feminist talking points within the film, they just wouldn't even pay much attention to it. And maybe that's why Godzilla wasn't considered, because it isn't pushing any agenda within the movie. So you look back to last year with Everything Everywhere at Once, there was a bit of an agenda there because the movie's feminist, and you know they're trying to push women more in the spotlight. That like the Oscars is trying to be more sensitive or inclusive about things. And even though I felt like last year Black Panther: Wakanda Forever should have won, this film here, Everything Ever Once, was the one that won. So like I'm not gonna bitch about it, but I did feel like Black Panther was far better than this one, in my opinion. And it still pushes like somewhat of a feminist or a woke agenda, basically, if you want to push it that far, because it did have some of that in it. But I just was more touched in the story about, well, Wakanda Forever than I was with Everything Everywhere at Once. But it is what it is.
because frankly, as I described in my review of the movie, I just didn't find it very good. And I'm not even talking about its political messaging. I just thought the movie was long and drawn out and awkward when it was trying to be funny.
I don't think it was super long. Like it's not really a long movie when I think about it. I've watched it 2 or 3 times now with the wife, and it seems to pass by pretty quickly. It's got some stupid comedy in there. Like when you kind of have Will Ferrell in there, you're gonna get that kind of like goofy, dumb comedy type stuff in there. Like you already have some of the goofiness with the Kens, and you know, I'll beat you off. I'm gonna beat you off better than you beat me off. You know, that kind of shit. Which is kind of funny considering that the movie's designed for young girls who are fans of Barbie and whatnot, but they're trying to push those envelopes with the sexual innuendos, you know what I mean? But you know, it's neither here or there. I thought it was a good 7 out of 10. I got some enjoyment out of it, and I know that there's points in Barbie that are kind of tongue in cheek. So certain points, Greta is using, kind of laughing at themselves a little bit. So despite the fact that I have some issues with the ending and like whether or not they can set an example, maybe I'll talk about that again at the end of this. I don't know, but let's continue on here.
So for the Oscars to be like, yes, this is so amazing. Here are all these nominations. It's like, okay, kind of feel like you're grading on a curve here. But with that said, when it comes to things like best costume design, best production design, that I can see, because I even said in my review, I thought the costume design and the production design was just really cool. And even as someone who didn't like the overall vibe of the film, credit where it's due, they did a good job in those areas. So that's my take. But according to social media, the real travesty here, and what is frankly almost unforgivable, is the fact that Margot Robbie, who plays Barbie, and Greta Gerwig, who wrote and directed the film, were not themselves nominated for Oscars, even though they arguably had the biggest roles in bringing this film to theaters. So is this the patriarchy that the Barbie film warned us about striking again? Or is it just that Margot Robbie, specifically in her role, didn't have that much material to work with to
It's not that Margot didn't have enough material. I think the funny thing is, like, if you think about it, when you look at the movie itself, like, we know that Barbie kind of goes through this transition where she's realizing that she realizes, like, she starts thinking about death because the Barbies are tied to real girls in the real world. So obviously the woman that is in charge of Barbie, her, is having dark feelings, and they're coming out, and it's coming through Barbie, and so now she's having to face these feelings that she never had in Barbie land. But the funny thing is, the journey that Ken takes in this film, whether intentional or not by Greta and Margot, because they're the ones that created this monster of a movie, it's Ken's journey that's the most transformative. Like, he's the one that's doing the biggest change through the whole entire movie. Um, Barbie herself is just coming to grips that she was living in this bubble that wasn't really real. But then you have Ken, who basically, with all the Kens being mistreated in Barbie land, they start discovering themselves in a different way, whether bad or good. And even by the end of it, he still is learning and transforming far more than Barbie is. So I don't have a problem with Margot Robbie's acting at all. I like her as an actress, but, like, if I'm going to say, if I was going to give Margot an Oscar for an acting role, like, I would almost do it for Harley Quinn more than I do it for this, because her portrayal of Harley Quinn is very exceptional, a really great job. Barbie to me isn't something that, I hate to say, it doesn't take a lot of effort, but because acting does, but I just didn't see, like, that being a real huge step for her in terms of, like, acting ability. Like, she's already a pretty gal, and it wouldn't have been hard for her to pull off this role. But someone like a villain, anti-hero like Harley Quinn is a little bit more difficult. But then you can go to any other movie that Margot's been in where it's a more serious role, and she's probably still acted better than she had in this film. And it's not, she did a good job, but, like, again, Ryan Gosling and his portrayal of Ken was the most interesting aspect of Barbie, because of his journey was a lot different than Barbie's herself. And even I've heard, even like those who try to argue whether or not Barbie's a feminist movie, that they say that, well, no, it's really about Ken and his journey. And so, like, you have feminists defending Ken, like, basically saying, yeah, it's Ken's journey, not so much Barbie's. And so there, pros and cons when it comes to, like, whether or not Margot deserved acting nod or Oscar nod for her particular role in this film. I don't think so. And this woman's going to get to some other movies that were nominated that have female directors and actresses that really you shouldn't be dismissing them just because you want Margot to win something. So, like, even if you had nothing but 5 actresses for the Oscar nominations, like, no men made it, right? So if you just went all 5 women, it doesn't mean just because Barbie was the biggest movie of the year in terms of money, it doesn't mean that her role was better than someone else who was in another movie. Like, I don't remember the other movies that are nominated right off the top of my head, but I did see that there was other mentions of female directors. Like, what do? Do you oust one of them to make room for Gerwig and Robbie just because? Or do you give credit to the other women who are working just as hard to make good movies and to be good actresses in those movies?
Exercise her depth as an actress. We're going to be discussing it, but first, I do want to say thank you to today's sponsor, Books. Hey guys, Valentine's Day.
I'm going to try to pass through this because I don't really want to care about that part of it.
Cause for some minor disappointment. Oh gee, get them next time. But hey, at least the work is out there and millions of fans are able to appreciate your work. However, when it came to Margot Robbie and Greta Gerwig getting snubbed for the Barbie movie, apparently this was a sign of the patriarchy at work. As obvious feminist ally Danny Wallace posted on X, Ken getting nominated for an Oscar and not Barbie is exactly why Barbie needed to be made. And similarly, user Lizzie tweeted, in the end, to prove the kind of society we live in, just Ken got nominated for an Oscar, but Barbie didn't. Says it all, doesn't it? In the same vein, Melanie DeRigo also wrote, the Oscars just unironically gave us the plot of the Barbie movie. Okay, so here's the thing. I know it's like really trendy and fourth wave feminist social activism nowadays to like be upset about stuff, but no, Margot Robbie and Greta Gerwig not being nominated does not mean that sexism is at play here. Number one, there is an entirely different category for Best Actress. So Ken getting a nomination and Margot Robbie not getting one, like those things are not connected. Okay, Margot Robbie was not competing against Ken for a nomination. She was competing against other leading actresses. So if Margot Robbie had been nominated, that means that another female actress out there would have been snubbed. And would you guys have been also as upset in that case of this other?
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. So if you're going to get mad that Robbie and Gerwig were snubbed for Oscar nominations, well, then what are you doing? You kicking out the other women who were being nominated just because you want to fit them in? So it's kind of like you're working against yourself if you're trying to oust other women being nominated for work that even though they just put just as much effort into it as Gerwig and Robbie. So I think it's very fair that, you can nominate Barbie for different things like the attire and music or whatever, and then not really nominate the director or Margot for certain things because you might feel like the other director and actresses were better. Like, even though the movie's great and has a lot of great things about it, at least according to some people, it doesn't necessarily mean they have to win every fucking category. You know what I mean? Or be nominated.
Other woman getting a snub? Probably not. Like, let's be real. This isn't really about a fight for feminism. It's about you liking Margot Robbie and liking the Barbie film, which is fair, but still, not everything is sexism. Also, let's talk about the actual material that Ryan Gosling and Margot Robbie were given to work with in the Barbie film. I mean, Margot Robbie is just kind of there. I'm not saying she doesn't do well in the role, but her transformation, her awakening to the feminist message. Personally, while watching the film, I didn't think she portrayed a great amount of range. I mean, she has some teary emotion.
And that's what I was getting at earlier. Is like, you look at the characters and whether Greta intended this to come out this way with this movie, I think people can identify and relate a lot more to Ken, at least from a guy's point of view, about his journey within this movie compared to Margot. So Barbie, her transformation just wasn't that huge. Like, she already was pretty much a pro girl or whatever it is. Like, the only thing she ever faced was, and which is kind of funny because one of the scenes early in the film when Margot and Ken, or when Barbie and Ken first get into the real world, she faces a bit of sexism right off the bat when a guy comes up and slaps her ass. But weirdly enough, she does what you would say is assault the guy and punch him in the face. Now, you could sit there and say she was defending herself, which is fine, but it's almost like two wrongs don't make a right. So the guy slaps her on her ass, but then she assaults the guy, and of course she gets arrested, and all that other stuff, goofiness. But her character overall doesn't really do like this huge jump from who she originally was anyway. But Ken is like a total transformation. He goes basically from one end of the spectrum to the deep end of the spectrum and then back, or at least to the middle. So there's a great moment in the movie that I really like is when, and it kind of gets overlooked a lot, is when Barbie gets back with the mother and the young girl that she's attached to back to Barbie Land, and Barbie Land's been taken over by the Kens, like it's now the kingdom, and there's a moment where Ken's just being kind of rude and obnoxious and dismissive of Barbie and her feelings, and she kind of tries to point that out to him, and he's like, well, yeah, well, how does it feel? And then there's just like moment of silence, like, because Barbie understands that she had been treating this guy like dog shit the entire time that Barbie then was supposedly perfect. And it does get overlooked a lot, but, again, it always comes back to, Ken wanted to be romantically involved with Barbie. She didn't want that. But, and that's fine. But the reality is like, they always kind of make it sound like it's such a negative thing that a guy wants to love a woman. Like, it's just really weird sometimes how this shit plays out. But I did like that scene a lot because it did just kind of flip it on its face and say, you're not any better than me, babe. You were just as bad as me. Like, I might be, a sexist pig right now, but you were doing the same shit before all this came about. So, again, Ken's journey of the transformation is just a lot deeper and bigger than what we saw with Barbie, the character.
Scenes, but still, it's just, I don't know, the role was kind of blah. In contrast to that, Ryan Gosling's performance, which was much more comedic than Margot Robbie's, it gave birth to how many memes online. People are still talking about that role. He made so much more of an impact. Not all roles in movies are created equal, and I have to say, even as someone who didn't really like the film, Ken stood out in a way that Margot Robbie just didn't. And in terms of Greta Gerwig getting snubbed, I've made it very clear I am not a fan of Greta Gerwig. I think she is a propagandist who is just more than happy to latch onto a popular IP like Barbie in order to push her feminist progressive message. And
I would agree with that, but I will say this. Neko and I also saw Greta's version of Little Women, like, because I'm a Watson fan. Not as much as I used to be, because I think Emma's now actually kind of retired from acting and whatnot, but I did enjoy the movie. Like, it had a lot of big names. You had Saoirse Ronan in it. The Pew chick, I can't remember her first name, but I feel so bad because I really like her as an actress. But there was a big cast in there. Timothy Chalamet, or whatever his name is. So, I mean, it's a strong cast. It was well done. Obviously, there's feminism in Little Women already, so like I knew that going in. So it's not. I don't really have a problem with Greta as far as like what she wants to achieve, because if you're a fan of Jordan Peele, he does pretty much the same thing with his black versus white, race issues within his movies. So you kind of go in knowing what you're gonna get. Like, I'm not saying I'm a big fan of hers in terms of the films, because like those aren't my normal films I would usually go see, but with my wife, I knew she'd really want to see Barbie, so like I have no problem going and checking it out. I am a fan of Margot Robbie and Gosling and some of the other actors involved, so it's not like I don't like their work. But if we're arguing the merits of whether or not they really deserve nominations for certain things of the movie, like I think that an argument can be made that they weren't really the best at their respective positions. Like, I know people are saying, well, how can you nominate the movie for Best Picture when you don't even nominate the director for Best Director? And like, that reality is, a picture can succeed regardless of the director or not. So, like, again, if I wanted to make an argument, Gosling pretty much stole the show with Barbie. And I know that's going to piss off a lot of feminists, but I can't help you with that. Like, that's just your issue, not mine. but that's really how I came out of it. Like, and even my wife would probably tell you the same thing. Like, she loves the movie top to bottom, but she will tell you that Gosling is probably like one of her favorite parts of the film. So, uh, well, again, whether that was intentional by Greta's writing or directing, I don't know, but it may have been of unintended consequence. Like, I don't think they thought the song "I Am Ken." Sorry, I don't know if they thought the song "I Am Ken" was going to win like it did. Like, it was very popular, and it was again pissing off the feminists. Like, oh, it's not really about Ken, but the film really is in a lot of ways. You made it about Ken when you brought him into the factor. So she could have easily just made the whole film about Barbies and no Kens at all. So I like the fact that they added in all that other stuff, and you got to see the different Barbies and the different Kens, and of course Alan and stuff like that. So I give her credit for that, but you can't be mad if someone just feels like when it came to Best Actress, two other women or three other women were better than Margot in terms of that particular character versus whatever character they're playing in these other movies. It's just how it is. If you look at it really on the surface, Barbie is a very plain movie. There's no real depth there. It's just about Barbies, like dolls. That's really what the movie's about. So it does have an underlying message, but the reality is it's not a super deep movie, except for if you're going to apply it to Ken, because his, again, was the most thought-provoking character in the film. Oh,
about you liking Margot Robbie and liking the Barbie film, which is fair. I think she portrayed a great amount of range. I mean, she has some teary emotional scenes, but still, it's just, I don't know, the role was kind of blah. In contrast to that, Ryan Gosling's performance, which was much more comedic than Margot Robbie's, it gave birth to how many memes online. People are still talking about that role. He made so much more of an impact. Not all roles in movies are created equal. And I have to say, even as someone who didn't really like the film, Ken stood out in a way that Margot Robbie just didn't. And in terms of Greta Gerwig getting snubbed, I've made it very clear. I am not a fan of Greta Gerwig. I think she is a propagandist who was just more than happy to latch onto a popular IP like Barbie in order to push her feminist progressive message. And I'm very, very afraid of what that woman is going to do with the Chronicles of Narnia. If I look at things critically, most of what I didn't like about the Barbie movie was due to Greta Gerwig's involvement.
I think that's very interesting too, because I don't know much about what's going on with the Chronicles of Narnia, so I don't know much about like how Greta got involved with that or not. But to my recollection, the Chronicles of Narnia are actually Christian books, like they're based off Christianity. So I have to say to myself, well, is Greta really just trying to poke a bear by doing those films, like trying to change them up? Is she going to throw, trans people in there just for the sake of pissing off the Christians? Like, I don't know. I often wonder, like, if people just do things because they want to piss off people, like for whatever reason. Like, granted, I don't watch stuff I don't want to watch. Like, I will not watch her versions of Chronicle because I kind of got the feeling that's all she's going to do is just doing it for a political statement rather than to try to write a good movie. Like, if you're going to do something like that, which is based off Christian books, I would hope that you would stay with the source material. But I have a feeling that she's going to just try to butcher the shit out of it in her own vision of what it will be. And, some people eat it up, of course, because they like to do the same shit. They like to troll people on the right for whatever reason. Vice versa, like we own a Snow White shit. They got the right now doing their own version of Snow White to piss off the left, etc., which is just kind of weird. But I don't know. Like, when it comes to these reboots and stuff, I wish people would just stick with the source material. Like, you can add some certain things into it, but it's clear that if Greta's going to be doing the Chronicles of Narnia, that she's doing it specifically to piss off like the Christian right or whatever. It's got to be. I can't imagine she's going to be doing it because she's a Christian herself. I just couldn't imagine that.
specifically, especially considering that she wrote the darn thing. The second and third acts being really weird and muddy, the awkward comedy, the overly long runtime, those are all things that Greta Gerwig could have fixed, but she did not. What about the visual aspects that you said you like, Lauren? The costumes and the set pieces, shouldn't Greta be praised for that? It's like, there are other people who were in charge of that specifically, and they did get nominations. So, I mean, honestly, I think this was the right call. I can't believe I'm saying this, by the people over at the Oscars. And you know what? If you're someone who's still really upset by this Oscars snub, I would say the best thing for you to remember is that ultimately these awards are just popularity contests. I mean, as Matthew Marsden, who is an actor, but surprisingly not super woke, as he pointed out, Black Hawk Down got 4 Oscar nominations, Barbie got 8. I'll just leave it there. Oscar nominations at the end of the day aren't everything, and despite not getting nominated for Best Director, Greta Gerwig still has this very popular film under her belt that made a boatload of money. So really, who cares what a bunch of critics say about it? What's really funny to me about this story, though, is aside from all these random people on Twitter being upset about the Oscars snub, Hillary Clinton actually went out of her way to tweet about it as well. In a tweet, she, or more likely her staff, wrote, "Greta and Margot, while it can sting to win the box office but not take home the gold, your millions of fans love you. You're both so much more than Knuff. Hashtag Hillary Barbie." Very, very cringy. And when you see politicians,
it is cringy, mainly because I probably would have been okay with it, really, but the last part where she says you're more than Ken enough, like, you're basically, again, waving your clit all over fucking men because you don't like the fact that they got snubbed, or you feel like they got snubbed. Like, it's not a sexist thing here. This isn't about sexism. This is just whether or not they were better at their respective jobs, particular jobs, than other people that were nominated for films. It's like, it's almost like there's these people that feel like they're entitled whenever a movie does well, that they're entitled to have every fucking nomination on the planet. And it's just stupid. I mean, I could sit here and cry all day about Black Panther, Wakanda Forever not winning over Everything Everywhere All at Once, but I'm not going to do that because it's just the reality of life. Like, you just deal with it and you move on. You don't cry about it. You don't make stupid ass statements like this. You can have a difference of opinion, but if you're going to sit there and just make these kind of comments like a former first lady does, you're just embarrassing yourself. Just stop. Like, just stop.
hopping onto a social media trend, in my opinion, that's how you know that it's basically empty political posturing. Because, and I hate to say this because I think it's just so indicative of the times that we are in, Hillary Clinton was not the only politician to comment on this. Joaquin Castro also weighed in saying Hollywood still has a big problem with women. In 2022, women made up 11% of directors. So in 2023, Greta Gerwig directs Barbie, the year's highest grossing film at $1.4 billion, provides coattails to Oppenheimer, saves WB's disastrous year. How do you end up directing the biggest hit of the year, a cultural phenomenon, and not get an Oscar nomination for Best Director? Be a female director in Hollywood, apparently. Great job, Joaquin. Nice guy, brownie points to you, I suppose. And this whole idea that, oh, Barbie made so much money, therefore it should have won an Oscar. This is something that actual industry people have been saying as well. As another Bounding into Comics piece explains, LA Times writer Glenn Whipp decried, 4 years after being overlooked for her work behind the camera for Little Women, the Academy's directors branch again slighted Gerwig, this time for Barbie. You'd think making a movie that grossed more than $1.4 billion in the box office, earned ecstatic reviews, and launched 1,000 think pieces would have merited a nomination. People magazine's Benjamin Van Hoos also wrote, Greta Gerwig was left out of the Best Director category, while star Margot Robbie was absent from the Best Actress category, further arguing, despite helming the #1 movie of the year at the box office, Gerwig, 40, was not recognized in the directing category. Okay, let's be real. None of you guys care about rewarding films that do well at the box office, okay?
Yep.
That is irrelevant to the discussion. If you actually thought that doing well at the box office would merit an Oscar, you would have been arguing for all of the Avengers movies to win Oscars, or Spider-Man.
Yep. I was just going to get into that. Like, some of the Marvel stuff and DC stuff out there makes so much money every year, but they never, ever get nods, ever. So you can't sit there and use, well, it went 1 billion and it should have fucking won. No, that's not how it works. It's not how it works. And it already has 8 nominations in other categories. So the fact that you're whining about 2 spots, that even though these other spots are taken by other female directors and actresses, is just embarrassing. Just stop. Just stop. You're just embarrassing yourselves. Stop it already.
Man, Far From Home, those types of films that tend to bring in the big bucks, but you haven't, right? There's no one in the access media saying that all the Minions films deserve to be nominated for all these awards because they bring in this much money. This is only something that they are bringing up because they happen to like Barbie once more because it is feminist propaganda. In any case, though, since the Oscars aren't actually happening until March, I guess we'll just need to wait and see whether the film actually wins anything. As other people online have pointed out, it would be really funny if the only Oscars the film actually ends up winning are the ones due to Ryan Gosling, specifically for I'm Just Ken and his own supporting actor role. And as always, I would love to know what you guys think down below. Do you think Barbie actually deserved the Oscar nominations? Do you think Margot Robbie and Greta Gerwig not being nominated is because of sexism? Let us know down below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time.
A word about
So yeah, that's where we're at with this whole Oscar snubby stuff. And look, I could care less if Margot and Greta had been nominated for director and actress. Like, it wouldn't have made a difference in my life for sure. But she's right. The girl in the video is right about, you know, if you're trying to use the how much money it made over the year as a justification, then you're already failing at your argument, because year in and year out, there are fantasy movies like Marvel, whatever, that like bring in shit ton of money, and they never get nominated for this stuff, like almost never. And so with that in mind, like, you just can't use it the same case here. Barbie is not like this, you know, great piece of artwork. It's a fantasy movie designed around dolls. It's a fine movie. It's 7 out of 10. As I said, it's a fine movie, but I'm not going to put it in. I wouldn't even nominate it for Best Picture, and it still got a Best Picture nomination. So for me, I feel more slighted that Godzilla -1 didn't get a nod. Like, that's to me, that's 10 times the movie that Barbie is, from top to bottom. And it's not, I know I have a little bit of a bias, but the reality is, even the story, if you take Godzilla out of the story, is far more impactful than what I got out of Barbie. And, you know, maybe it's a lot different for women, and I kind of assume it is on some level, but most people that I talk to about Godzilla -1 feel the same way. Like, just in terms of like how they came out of that theater and how they felt about the movie and the reaction and emotions they felt in that movie that weren't even related to Godzilla on the screen. Like, we're all big kaiju fans, etc. But I was so impressed with the story writing of -1 that there's just no way that that movie was going to not be number one, regardless of my favoritism towards Godzilla films and whatnot. And even then, I think if I go back to my top 10 of the last year, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was number 2 on my list. And the reason for that is, again, I could have chosen many years any Marvel movie to be on my list, and some I did. Like the year before, I had Wakanda Forever as my number 1, which I did not expect. Really, I did not. But Guardians 3, like, the emotions I felt throughout that film, and we're talking about a lot of CGI work, like, you know, but the way that things are conveyed with the animals and Rocket's backstory and everything, like, was very emotional. As someone who loves animals, like, it's hard to see that, even if you know it's like fantasy and just CGI. The storytelling is great. I wouldn't say that Barbie's story herself was as great as Ken's. That's why there's this debate right now about which character was more interesting in Barbie. So I wish people, when they would talk about these things, for the most part, would stay objective, because when you start throwing out sexism and patriarchy and all this other bullshit, even if you think it exists on some level, you're being disingenuous when you try to use it as like a scapegoat for every time something doesn't happen in your favor or what you want. And so, again, even if Gerwig and Robbie got nominations for those roles, like, it wouldn't affect me one way or the other. Like, more power to them if they did. But I'm not going to sit there and say sexism is the reason why they didn't, because I can look at that film objectively and say that Gosling's character in that film was far more interesting, far more transformative than Barbie's was. If you're mad at somebody about that, be mad at Gerwig. That's the way she wrote that fucking film or directed it. That's just the way it is. It's not Gosling's fault. He just worked with the material he had. And it's not that Margot Robbie's a bad actress at all. Like, I like her a lot. But her character, the role, just isn't that interesting overall. And then it goes back to, some of the other nominations for female directors and actresses. Like, what do? Do you kick them out to place the other two women in there? So you're basically being sexist against other women because two women didn't get in that you really wanted. If I'm going to go from a feminist point of view, the idea is to be uplifting. So you shouldn't be just uplifting two more public and popular figures. You should be uplifting to any woman who's directing or any woman who's an actress who gets a nomination. You should be supportive of that and not try to use them as a way to like oust them out of there just because you didn't like two other women that didn't get there. So that's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts on this. You can flame me. I don't care. I could take it all. I'm all about taking the heat, but I'm not going to change my opinion on this. It's not, again, I don't hate Barbie. I gave it a 7 out of 10. It's okay movie. I was entertained at portions of it. I definitely saw the feminist slant, but I knew that going in because of Gerwig. I knew who she was. So I wasn't shocked or anything like that when I saw it, but I'm not going to be offended that they didn't get a certain nomination because I can understand why they didn't. Now, I can't say without a doubt that I've seen the other movies with these other women and directors to make a balanced judgment of whether or not their acting was better than Robbie's, but chances are the movies are so different. Chances are the other people nominated are probably way better at their roles. Like, it's just the character is written, right? So give me your thoughts. Hit the like button if you like it, share if you want, and subscribe if you enjoy the channel. We appreciate all the support here. And we'll see you next time here on the Military Radio Podcast, and take care of yourselves. Peace.